Okay, let's take a look at the for loop. We'll see how it works. We'll see what some of the options are, and then look at some examples. So the simplest case of the for loop is we say for, and then I have some kind of looping variable I, and then I have a range for I in range. So let's say range 5. Now notice as soon as I open the range, it's sort of like a function, but exactly. It gives me something called a range object. But as far as we're concerned, we can think of it as a function that generates a list of numbers. And there are three arguments I can pass into this: a start value, a stop value, and a step value. The easiest case is just providing the stop value, because you notice these square brackets, basically those indicate that these are optional. And if I leave them out, so Python will use some default values. So we're going to leave them out the first time through. I'm going to put a stop value. So if I say the stop value is 5, and I close it up, I then put a colon. What this is going to do for me every time I come back to the top of this for loop is that it's going to give me the next value in the range. By default, the range starts at 0 and ends 1 before the 5. So it's going to give me 0, and the next time 1, and then 2, and then 3, 4. So it's going to give me 5 values starting at 0, going to 4. So we'll print them out and just see that that really happens. So I say print I, and when I run this thing, I in fact get those values. Okay, let's say we wanted to, instead of from 0 to 4, let's say if we wanted from 1 to 5. So again, it would be a for loop, for, again, the loop variable I, and then in the range. But now, instead of using the default value of 0, I'm going to put a start value of 1. And the stop value, if I wanted to go up to 5, I have to make the stop value 6, because it goes up to but not including the stop value. So I say for I in range, go from 1 to 6, and that's going to give me the values of 1 up to 5. And I say print I, and let's see if that works. I get 1 to 5. Okay? Now let's say we wanted to do the following. Remember, we had a program where we wanted to get the leap years. Now the leap years were every 4 years, except for century years. So let's see if I can get all the 4 years from the year 4 to, let's say, 125. So I select this, for I in range. Now I'm going to start at 4, because leap years start 4. They go 4, 8, and so on. And go to, let's say, up to, but not including 125. But now what I can do is I can also provide a step value. A step value means when you come back up to the loop, what's the next value for the loop variable? If I say 4, what it's going to do is it's going to add the step value, which is 4 each time. So I'm going to start at 4, because that's my start value. And then if I say the step value, in other words, each time add a 4, I should get 4, 8, and so on. So let's try that. I'm going to say print I. And this is not quite the leap years, because it's going to be century years also, but let's see if that actually works. So I get 4, 8, 12, 16, and so on. Why is that happening? Because 4 is the start value. The step value is also 4, so the next time it's going to be 4 more than the previous one. And it goes up to 124 because 125 is the stop value, so it goes up to but not including 125. Okay, that's the way this thing works. Okay, now let's actually make it into a program, a program that gives me the leap years. So to do that, I'm going to have the same range as before. I is going to start at 4 and then go 8 and so on. But now, instead of just printing I, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check that I is not a So I'm going to do that by simply asking a question, if. Now I is going to be the loop variable, so I is the one that's going to be 4, 8, and so on. But I only want to print them if I is not a century year, because century years are not leap years except if they are divisible by 400. So how do I actually say that? So I want to take I and do what? See if you can answer the question before you see the rest of the code. So if I is not divisible by 100, how do I say divisible by 100? if I mod 100 is not equal to a 0, right? That would mean it's not divisible by 100. Or if it is divisible by 100, you want to print, if it's not divisible by 100, you want to print it. Or when else do you want to print it? Or if it is divisible by 100, in other words, this thing is false, then it has to be divisible by 100. So I mod 400 is equal to 0. In those cases, you want to print. In those cases, we're going to say print I. Let's see if this works. So this is not going to test the 400 case, but let's see what happens over here with the 100 case. So you'll notice that it goes from 96 to 104. Now, let's try this again. I'm just going to copy this code, bring it down over here, and modify it so that I'm going to go from, let's say, 296, and I want to go, I'm going to start 296, I want to go to 400, let's say, and 4, and I'm going to go steps in 4, and let's see if it actually does the right thing. So 296, it skips 300, but when it gets to 400, it actually prints 400. So this seems to work. And all the other numbers in the middle, it prints as well. Okay, so that's sort of an easy way to get all of the leap years in a particular range. Let's try another problem. Let's modify the for loop over here so that this is going to print, as we see, it prints all of them in a straight column right down. Let's say instead of just in a straight column, what I want to do is I want to print them 5. So how would we do that? How would we get it 5 across? So one possibility would be to go over here at the top. Here we had, this was printing them down in a row, in a column, as you see over here. So instead of doing that right on top over here, what we're going to do is maybe we'll put some kind of counter. Maybe some counter, let's say, call it count. And I'll start count at 0, something like over here. Let's see, put count equals 0. And then over here, every time I print, I'm going to increment count. I'll say something like count plus equals 1. And then every time I count, since this increments, after it becomes 5, I'll just simply print a blank line, right? Because it's going to start out here at 1, at 0. The first time it prints, it's going to be 0. Then it's going to make it 1. When it prints the first time, it's going to make it 2, and then 3, and then 4. And then it'll be 5. And then when it's 5, I want to set it back to 0 because I want to print 5 times. Let's see if that actually works. So I'm going to have some kind of if statement over here, and we'll see that in a bit. Let's go actually modify the code and see what happens. I'm going to pick this code. I'm going to modify. So we'll say count equals 0. See if this works. And now I'm going to do is I'm going to just copy this over here. So I have a new variable called count. Pick this up. I'll put it here. And after the print, every time I print, I'm going to say count plus equals 1. So now after I finish the first time, it's going to be 1. And so what do I want to do here? I want to say if count is equal to what? Equal to what? When is it that I want to print a blank line? Well, after the 5th line is printed, it's going to be 5. So if count is equal to 5, what do I want to do? I want to print a blank line. So I say print. How do I get a blank line? Just like that, right? Print by itself prints a blank line. But then we have to be very careful here because what we want to do is we want to set the counter back to 0 so that every time it comes back again, it's going to start at 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So I'm going to say count gets reset to 0. That's make sure you understand how this thing works. Let's see if this actually works. Let's try this again from 1 to from the year 4 to, let's say, the year 125 as we had in the beginning. 125, and let's run this piece. Doesn't seem to work. I do get 4. I get 1. I did 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. I get 5. But I get them in a column, not as a row. What's going on? See if you can figure this out. Stop the video, and then let's see what we can do about this. What's the problem here? So you'll notice that every time it prints, it goes to the next line. How do we get it not to go to the next line? So we can modify the print statement, this one right over here, so that at the end, instead of by default doing what? Going to the next line, I can say end equals, and I can put a space over here like that. What will happen is, while it's printing every one of these things, it's going to print the first one, and it's not going to go to the next line, the second one, and so on. It's only go to the next line when count is equal to 5. Let's see if that helps anything. Let's actually run this program, and this looks much better, right? So it's printing 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5, and so on. So this seems to actually work. The only thing is, as you see, it's not really lining up the numbers nicely. How do I get them to line up in columns so we can modify this that we have up here, and we can do it with a format statement. Modify the code above before you watch the rest of the video and see if you can make it work. So we're going to use the format statement, but where should we put it? Well, what happens here is these values here are being printed in this statement over here. The biggest one is going to go up to, let's say, if we're printing, let's say we want to go up to 2500. 2500 is 4 spaces. Takes up 4 columns. If we put in 6 columns and we write adjust everything in those 6 columns, it should be nice. So how do I do that? I'll simply, instead of saying print I put a format function here. So I say format. Notice it tells me how to do this. So it's a format, and then there's a value. The value is going to be I, and then a comma, and then the format specifier. We saw this in class. What comes back from that is a string, but that's okay. So I'm going to say format I, comma, and the specifier has to be a string. So the specifier is going to say I'm going to use 6 columns, and it's going to be digits, so it's 6D. Close it up like that, close it up like that, but I still need another comma over here before this ends. And if we didn't mess things up, this should actually work. So let's try this, and there we get it nice in columns. Okay, so here we have these are all the leap years between 4 and 124, including 124 in nice columns. Here's another example of for loops. This is in the class notes on page 67, and the problem was the following. So I want to print this. If you think about it a little bit, you notice it's a little bit like the multiplication problem, because here I have 1 and 1, 1 and 1, 2 and 1, 3 and 1, 4. In the multiplication problem, we were multiplying 1 by 1, 1 by 2, 1 by 4, and so on. And then we went 2 by 1, 2 by 3. Here I'm just writing these things out. So how do we do this thing? How do we get it to make these to write these pairs? So it's pretty straightforward. Basically, what you want to do is you're going to break it down into sub-problems, and the problems seem to be straightforward. First of all, I'm going to have an outside loop that's going to be generating the first ones, right? So the first loop is going to go I starts at 1, and then I will be 2, and I will be 3, and I will be 4. And within every one of those I's, I'm going to have a second loop where J is going to go from 1 to 4. So it looks something like this. It's going to say for I in range what? So I want it to start at 1, so the range starts at 1. And where do I want it to go to? I want it to go to 4, so that means it has to stop at 5. What about the stepping value? So each time I is going to go up by 1, right? I mean, I is going to go 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4, right? I is going in this direction here. These are going to be my I's. It's going to give me the columns. So by default, it's going to go in 1, so I can just leave it like this. So I goes from 1 to 5. Now when I is equal to 1, right, this is the one that's going to give me the I, right? There's going to be I is equal to 1. I want J to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I would simply say for J starts in the range, it's in the range also, same range, 1 to 5. And what do I want to do here? For every pair I and J, I want to print that I comma J. So that's simply a print statement. I say print and I want to print I, print the value of I, and then I want to print a comma. So that's simply the character, the string comma. So print a comma, and then I want to print the J. So it's going to print, as it's the first time, it's going to print I starts at 1, and then J will be 1, so it's going to print 1, 1. But what do I want to do over here? So we want to do the same sort of trick that we did before, namely, we want to come over here where the parentheses is, and instead of by default going to the next line every time we print, what we want to do is we want to say, get rid of this guy here, right? Instead of this, we want to say comma, we want to say at the end, so just at the end give me a space, right? So what will happen is it's going to print 1, 1 and give me a space, and then it's going to be 1, 2 and give me a space, 1, 3 and give me a space, and so on. The issue here, of course, is it's going to simply keep doing this across. It's going to give me 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, and then when I becomes 2, it's going to keep going along that same row. I don't want to do that, right? What I want to do is I want to go to the next line, right? So we can do the same kind of thing we did before, namely, after I finish printing the 5 values, I want to the 4 values, I want to go to the next line. So what we do is right over here where the 4 is, after I finish this 4, I simply want to say print, and with nothing in here, that's going to give me a blank line. So what will happen is I starts at 1, I'm going to get 1, and then J goes through that loop, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to get 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, all in the same row. And then it's going to finish this for loop, come down over here, it's going to print a blank line, it's going to start the second line, the third line, the fourth line. How do I put these parentheses in there? So the parentheses are just simply characters, so instead of printing I first, I simply print the character, left parentheses, then an I, then a comma, then a J, then a right parentheses, and so on. That should work. Try that out and make sure that it works for you. Okay, here's another example. What you want to do is take a look at this code. This is some new code over here. So I is in range 5. That means it goes from 0 to 4. And J starts at 0 but goes up to whatever I is. So when I is equal to 3, J will go 0, 1, 2. It's going to print the value of I, and then it's going to leave a space. When it finishes, each time it's going to finish the inside loop, it's going to simply print a blank line, which means go to the next line. What I want you to do at this point is I want you to stop the video, I want you to predict what's going on, and then run the program to see if it is going to do what you think it's going to do. Okay, so stop the video and then check it out. Okay, and here goes. We run it, and we get 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4. Why did that happen? Why did that happen? So there are a couple of interesting things happening over here. Notice what's happening with I. I starts at 0 and goes to 4. So this loop is actually, this outside loop should be happening 5 times. But if you notice how many lines are actually printed, only 4 lines are printed. So that's the first thing to notice. And the question is, why is it doing that? So let's see what happens the first time. I starts out at 0, and J is in the range from 0 to I, but I is 0. So that means it's going to go from 0 to 0. It's going to start at 0, go up to, but not including the top of the range, which is 0. Well, how does it do that? So it's going to skip that case, right? The case that J starts when I is equal to 0, it's going to not do that because it's going to try to go from 0 to 0, which is a range. It's an empty range because it can't go starting at 0 up to, but not including 0. That's why it doesn't print the case when, doesn't print when I is equal to 0. Notice it starts at I equals 1. Comes back over here, I becomes 1. It now comes down here, and J goes from 0 to 1. That's the range having only one value, so it prints a 1, and it prints a space, and then it comes back down here, it prints a blank line, which means it goes to the next line. It doesn't give you a blank line. If I want a blank line, I need an extra print in there, an extra print with no arguments. Comes back here, now I becomes 2. When I becomes 2, it's going to do what? It's going to print, J is going to go in the range from 0 to 2, which means it's going to print, it's going to have 2 values, but it's going to print I, so it's going to print 2 and 2 twice, right? When I is 2, so it's going to go from 0 to 2, and it's going to print I. When it finishes this inside loop, comes down over here, it means go to the next line, comes back here, I is 3, comes in here, j gets set from 0, j to 3, 0 to 3 is 0, 1, and 2. It's going to do this loop 3 times, and it's going to print the value of I, which is 3, so it prints 3, 3, 3, and finally 4, 4, 4. Okay, that's important. Make sure you understand how that thing works. Is there any difference, for example, if I were to move this print statement to coincide with this, right? Notice the way things work. It depends where everything is. So what happens if I take this print and I move it so that it coincides with the 4 over here? Let's see if I can get that right. Let's see if that works. The indents don't match. Okay, let me run it from within a program. I'm going to run the module, save, OK. Notice what happened is I took the print that was under here and I print the print over here. The question is going to do the same thing. Let's check it out. Let's run it, and it doesn't do that, right? It doesn't do that at all. What I did is I moved this print so it's under this 4. It doesn't do that. The question is, why not? And the answer is because when is it going to do this print if it's over here, right? When does that print happen? That happens only after the outside for loop is going to be satisfied. So it prints everything it prints and it comes here. Make sure you understand that exactly. Let's do one more example. This is the same one we had before. But now instead of printing I, what happens when I print J? Make sure that that makes sense to you. So I'm printing the value of this inner loop, not the outer loop. Or stop the video and then see, and then we'll run it. Okay, and when we run it, we get the following. So now I get 0, 1, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3. Again, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 lines for the same reason as above, but now I'm printing the value of the inner loop, not the outer loop. Okay, make sure this is very clear.